Hello, everybody. And thanks for coming here so early after this amazing evening we had yesterday at Les Halles de Lyon. I'm Lionel Medini. I'm the third general co-chair of the conference. And I hope you are all awake and listening since we have a great program today. First, we will have a keynote on web privacy and security from the user's perspective. Immediately followed by a panel where you will be able to ask questions and to participate. Then you will discover the presentation of the 2019 edition of the conference. And then we will have the break, which will be your last chance to discover and to vote for posters and demos. So don't miss it. After this, we will have, as usual, 2 sessions before and after lunch. And then the closing session, during which we will have a take-home message from Robert Kallio, who is the founder of IWTC2 and the web conference series, as well as the awards ceremony, where we will award the best research paper, best poster, best demo, as well as the best reviewers for the research track. Just one point about the best poster and best demo. As I told you, you can vote for them. So please do go to the exhibition hall, find the best poster or the best demo you want to vote for. And after this, you will have on the poster board a number that you will have to write on a paper and put in the ballot boxes that are on the registration desk. So now it is my honor to introduce our third keynote speaker, who will talk about web privacy and security, the user experience. She is the 4 systems professor of computer science and of engineering and public policy at Carnegie Mellon University, where she is the director of the Scilab Usable Privacy and Security Laboratory. She is associate department head of the Engineering and Public Policy Department and co-director of the MSIT Privacy Engineering Master's Program. She is a leading researcher in both online privacy and usable privacy and security. She has played a key role in building the usable privacy and security research community and founded the Symposium on Usable Privacy and Security. She chaired the Platform for Privacy Preferences Project, also known as P3P W3C Working Group. She served as chief technologist at the US Federal Trade Commission and was appointed as a Privacy by Design ambassador for the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario in Canada. She is also a co-founder of Wombat Security Technologies Incorporated. She has co-authored over 150 research papers in these areas, authored 1 book and co-edited a 2nd. She was named an SAM Fellow in 2014 and an IEEE Fellow in 2016, and she was elected to the ACM Chi Academy in 2017. So I must confess that I had a bit of an issue about the introduction of this speaker, given the topic of the talk, because talking about privacy, I didn't know if I could disclose her name. Of course, Fabien, who took care of those slides of all the plenary sessions, didn't have my scruples. So thanks to him, I can very warmly welcome, and I hope you will very warmly welcome, Lorrie Cranor.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for waking up early and coming to hear this talk. We're going to talk about privacy and security from the user perspective. So security and privacy are what is known as secondary tasks. So unless you are a security professional, you probably don't sit down in front of your computer on a regular basis to do security and privacy. We sit down in front of our computer to send emails and to watch videos and play games and do our homework, but we generally don't want to spend a lot of time doing security and privacy. But on the other hand, if we want to actually protect our security and privacy, there are a lot of things that we are still expected to do. And I'm going to talk about a number of these things today. So we'll talk about privacy policies. They're on websites. We're supposed to read them. Of course, most people don't. And then there are these little symbols and icons that are supposed to tell us something about privacy and help us do something to protect it. And then we have private browsing modes and various privacy features in our web browsers that we may or may not really understand what to do with. And then, of course, there are passwords. Seems like we have more and more of them all the time, except that they're supposed to be long and unique and hard for other people to figure out. And we're supposed to remember them and not use the same ones over and over again. And then every now and then, something pops up with some sort of a problem. Oh my gosh, my connection is not private. What do I do now? So I'm going to talk about all of these things. So we'll get started with privacy policies. So about 10 years ago, my student at the time, Alicia McDonald, came into my office. And some of you may know Alicia because she's been involved in Do Not Track. So Alicia said, I have an idea for a research project. Let's figure out what would happen if everybody read all the privacy policies at all of the websites that they visit. And I said, well, Alicia, don't be ridiculous. Like, that will never happen. And she said, yeah, I know it will never happen, but let's figure it out anyway. And so she went and got some data. She got data about how many different websites most people visit in a typical month. She got data about how many words are in a website privacy policy. She got data about how fast people read. She crunched all the numbers, and she came back and she said, well, if everybody read all of the privacy policies at all of the websites they visit, even just once a year, they would spend 244 hours per year reading privacy policies. Okay, that is clearly ridiculous. Like, I actually spend more time than I'd like to reading privacy policies, and I do not spend 244 hours per year reading privacy policies. So this suggests that the notion that we have these policies that are only useful if people read them, is a good idea for privacy. This suggests that maybe there's a problem there. Now, of course, this was 10 years ago, so maybe things have changed. And fortunately, here at this conference this week, we actually had an update. So there was a paper presented that evaluated this again, and they said, well, maybe this is an overestimate. It could be that since the length of the privacy policies we calculated was only for the most popular websites, it turns out that if you look at the less popular websites, their privacy policies tend to be shorter. So maybe this is an overestimate. On the other hand, this paper also pointed out that most websites have third parties that are embedded in them and are also collecting data. So really, it's not enough to read the privacy policy of the first-party website. You also have to read the privacy policies of the third-party websites. And if you add that in, then this is probably an underestimate, and it might take actually even longer to read all the privacy policies. And this is what a typical privacy policy looks like. This is one for an American website, and it's 30 pages long. So no wonder that people don't really want to read these things. And in fact, this is not a surprise. This is a quote from a report that came out from the US White House about 4 years ago. Only in some fantasy world do users actually read these notices and understand their implications before clicking to indicate their consent. So we all know that it's actually a fantasy that people will read privacy policies. So if we know that nobody's reading them, why is it important to have them? Well, there are many reasons. So first of all, there are laws that require them. And with the new European GDPR regulations, there are going to be more and more companies, even outside of Europe, that are going to need to have privacy policies. In the US, where we don't have so many privacy laws, we also have some companies in some industries that have to have privacy policies. But even if they're not required by law to have privacy policies, most companies have them. And this allows regulators in the United States to actually enforce privacy on these companies, even if there isn't a privacy law. So we have laws for laws against fraudulent and deceptive practices. And so if a company has a privacy policy and they make a certain commitment to privacy, and then they don't follow that commitment, then they have violated a law, even if it's not a privacy law. Privacy policies also provide people with information about the choices they have about privacy and how they can opt out of certain types of data collection practices. And so you need to actually read the privacy policy to find out what your choices are and how you can opt out. And even if not everybody reads privacy policies, there are some people who do routinely read privacy policies. These people tend to be privacy advocates, journalists, and regulators. And if they read privacy policies and find something surprising and something that we should... is that better? OK. Something surprising, something that we should know about, it often makes the front page news. And so we all find out about the companies that may be violating our privacy. There are also automated tools that can give us information about privacy policies. And while they generally don't read the whole privacy policy, they do extract certain key pieces of information. So this is an example of a tool called Ghostery, which keeps track of the third-party trackers that are on websites, and it can give you a summary of them. All right, so the problem with privacy policies on websites is bad enough. But now our data is being collected by IoT devices in our environment. And this poses an even bigger problem. Are you going to stop every drone flying by and see if it has a privacy policy? What about those smart light bulbs and smart thermostats? What data are they collecting about you? So this is also quite a problem. But it's a problem that we need to solve. So I spent 2016 working at the US Federal Trade Commission for Commissioner Edith Ramirez, and she said in a speech about IoT privacy, the question is not whether consumers should be given a say over unexpected uses of their data. Rather, the question is how to provide simplified notice and choice. And in Europe, we have the same demand. The EU General Data Protection Regulation says that we need to have information about privacy that is transparent and easily accessible. It has to be in an intelligible form, using clear and plain language. But how do we do this? One idea that people have been talking about for a while is to use food nutrition labels as a model. They're pretty clear, and most people seem to understand them. And we've had them in the US for a while, but now we even have them internationally. So this is the bag of pretzels I got on the airplane with a nutrition label in both English and French. And this is becoming increasingly common in countries around the world. So there are a number of things that are useful about nutrition labels. One is that they're standardized. That means that once you learn how to nutrition label, you can pick up any food product that has this nutrition label, and you'll be able to understand it. You can also put two products side by side and compare them. Because the language is standardized, if there are new terms that you learn, you find out what does it mean, cholesterol, sodium. Once you learn it, you can then apply that term to every food product that you look at. My students at Carnegie Mellon came up with They worked on this about 10 years ago, and you can see in this particular version, you have different types of information down the left column, and these are fairly coarse groupings of information. And across the top, we have different uses of information that a company might engage in. And we can see from the colored cells at a glance how much information this company collects and whether it's required or it's opt-out or opt-in and whatnot. Now, even better than a nutrition label format, perhaps we could have our computers read privacy policies for you. And that was the idea behind the Platform for Privacy Preferences, or P3P. And so this is a W3C standard that came out in 2002, and I chaired that working group for almost 6 or 7 years as part of that project. Now, as we were working on P3P, which was an XML language for privacy policies, I realized that in order for P3P to be useful, we needed good user agents that would allow people to actually have P3P do something useful for them, because nobody wants to actually read that XML. So I worked on a project at AT&T, which is where I was working at the time, to develop a user agent called PrivacyBird. And the way PrivacyBird worked is that at every website you visited, PrivacyBird would go and fetch the P3P policy and analyze it for you. And you could set up your personal privacy preferences, and you'd set it up once at the beginning, and at every website it would check to see if there was a match. So if you were at a website that matched your privacy preferences, you get a green chirping bird, and chirp is missing. Nope, no chirp. Back and forth. All right, we have a chirp. So we have a green happy chirp here at this website because its privacy policy matches my preferences. And I can click on the bird, and I can bring up a more detailed view of the privacy policy. This is basically translated from the XML into a human-readable language automatically. On the other hand, if I visit a website that doesn't match my privacy preferences, do this again. Apparently, you're not going to hear the red angry bird. No, I can't try again. All right, it worked before. Anyway, trust me, you get it sounded like a crow. It was a red angry bird, and that indicates bad privacy. You can also find out in some cases that maybe there's something you can opt out of so that the privacy policy would be acceptable to you. And so PrivacyBird provided a link to the page where you could go and opt out. So we used PrivacyBird, and we tested it, and it seemed to work pretty well. But one problem that people complained about is if I go to a website and I get that red angry bird, and I realize that they don't have a good privacy policy, perhaps I'm in the process of trying to buy something online, and I need to find a different website that would respect my privacy. And it was really difficult with PrivacyBird because I had to go trial and error to different websites until I found one where the bird would turn green. And so we developed a search engine that had PrivacyBird built in, and this was called Privacy Finder. So here, you run a search, and then you see along the left column those green boxes. And those are privacy meters indicating which websites have privacy policies that match my preferences. And we did a study here to find out whether anybody cared. Would this actually change the purchasing habits of people online? So in this study, we actually assigned people to go shopping online. And we set up the system so that we had different websites they could purchase from, and that the products were more expensive at the websites with better privacy policies. And what we found is that with this salient privacy information, many people would actually pay a little bit more to shop at the websites with better privacy policies. So this was one of the first demonstrations that when privacy information is salient, people will actually pay for privacy. Now, Microsoft built P3P into their Internet Explorer web browser in versions 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And it was on by default. So the 99.9% of people who never changed their IE privacy settings had this P3P default privacy setting. And what the setting was that, first of all, a website that did not have what's known as a P3P compact privacy policy had their third-party cookies rejected. A compact privacy policy, in this case, was an extra HTTP header so that the web browser could quickly make a cookie blocking decision without having to parse the full XML policy. So by default, you don't have the compact policy. Third-party cookies get blocked. Now, if you have a compact policy, then Internet Explorer would evaluate it and decide whether it was satisfactory according to Microsoft. And if it was not satisfactory, then again, the third-party cookie would be rejected. Now, the problem was that this implementation did no syntax checking. And we did a study. We scraped all of the P3P compact policies that we could find, about 33,000 of them, and we found that about a third of them had syntax errors in them. They had bogus compact policies, or they had compact policies that were missing required tokens. And we found some evidence that a lot of these were not just casual errors, but in fact errors that had been committed on purpose. So this is an example of a valid compact policy. You can see it's all 3- and 4-letter tokens, and there's a certain set of them that are required. You have to have one from each category at least. And here are some examples of invalid compact policies. Facebook does not have a P3P policy. Learn why here. Right? None of these are valid P3P compact policy tokens. And then Amazon just had AMZN, which looks like it might, it's 4 characters, but that's a completely made up and meaningless compact policy token. So these compact policies mean nothing. They're completely useless for Internet Explorer, except that it ensures that Internet Explorer will not block your third-party cookies. So I saw this, and I wrote a paper about it. And the New York Times actually picked up on it, so it got quite a bit of publicity, but nothing happened. And then 2 years later, Microsoft finally decided to do something about it, and they wrote a blog post accusing Google of bypassing their user privacy settings. It was Google and 30,000 other websites. And Google fired back. And they said, well, Microsoft uses a self-declaration protocol known as P3P dating from 2002, and it is well known that it is impractical to comply with Microsoft's request while providing modern web functionality. Well, I think that's debatable, but maybe. P3P is obsolete. So I sat back and wondered, well, is anything going to happen now? And it continued, nothing happened. And my understanding is that now W3C is actually considering declaring P3P obsolete. And that's too bad, because there really is nothing to replace it. And increasingly, people are coming up to me and saying, we should really have a computer-readable language for privacy policies. I kind of laugh and say, yeah, we should. Now, we do have Do Not Track, or at least we're trying to have Do Not Track, and maybe someday soon we will have Do Not Track. Do Not Track is actually built into the major web browsers, but it doesn't really do anything particularly useful for users for the time being. And so we have a lot of tracking. And companies are using this tracking in order to serve targeted ads to us. And you can see this one has me figured out pretty well, or at least according to my kids. Like, yeah, no wonder you got that ad, Mom. And this one has me figured out pretty well, too. I spend too much time buying camera equipment. And the second one, you may notice something interesting about it. In the top right corner, there's this little blue triangle icon. And if I click on this icon, I can actually get information about why this ad was targeted to me. And sometimes when I click on this icon, and I do this a lot, the information I get is not very useful. But this one actually made some sense. This one explained that there were a bunch of products that I viewed on this particular website that it was keeping track of, and that people who viewed those products tended to go on to purchase products which they were now advertising to me. So that makes sense. And it also gives me information about how to temporarily disable this tracking or to permanently disable this tracking. So this is actually fairly useful. But most people don't understand this. So this is fake news. It's from The Onion. But this is a story that I hear from people I know all the time. People say, these shoes are following me around the internet. I can't get rid of them. That toaster is following me around the internet. And they don't understand why it happens. And I say, well, don't you click on that little blue triangle thing? And they don't know what I'm talking about. And sometimes when I click on that little blue triangle thing, I don't really get very useful information. So I like to check the weather forecast late at night before I go to bed. And I discovered that I was getting ads routinely about pharmaceutical products. And not even pharmaceutical products for any types of conditions that I have or that I remember doing any web searches related to. Just kind of random pharmaceutical products. And so I clicked on that little icon, and I found out the name of the drug company that was advertising to me. And they claimed that these were ads likely to be of interest based on your web browsing activity. But it's a complete mystery to me as to what sort of web browsing activity they think I was doing that was relevant to these pharmaceutical products. So we did a study in our lab to see how well other people understand this sort of ad targeting and the tools that you can use in order to opt out and prevent this sort of targeting. So we evaluated tools that were built into web browsers, as well as some online consumer choice tools, which would set opt-out cookies to opt out of tracking, as well as some browser plugins. So when we interviewed 48 people, we found that people understood a little bit about online ad targeting, and they did understand that there was some potential here to help them, that they could get ads for products that they might actually be interested in purchasing, and they thought that was a good thing. However, they were very concerned about privacy. They were very concerned about what information these companies were collecting about them and what they were going to do with it. And they did not understand at all how this particular technology worked. They didn't understand what information was being collected or where it was going to go. And they had a lot of misconceptions about it and a lot of fears. They also had misconceptions about this little blue triangle thingy, this ad choices icon. Some people told us that they thought if you clicked on it, you would express interest in the product. Or it was a way to purchase ads on your own. Or it was a way to go to the product's website, or a way to see related ads. These things are all completely wrong. We also asked people how they thought they could prevent tracking. A lot of people talked about deleting cookies. Some people said they thought there was something in their antivirus product that maybe could help them. Some people talked about web browser controls, although most of them didn't really know which control they would actually use. And some people said, oh no, you cannot prevent tracking. It's just not possible. We also showed people a number of companies that do online tracking. We showed them the names of the companies, and we asked them how familiar they were with those companies, as well as how much they trust them to do tracking for them. Would they want to allow those companies to track them? So on the bottom left, you see companies like 24/7 Real Media, Blue Kai, Casal Media. Those were all companies that people said, hey, we're not familiar with these companies. Why should we trust them? And then on the right, you see something even more interesting. So people said, oh, Google, yeah, I use that search engine all the time. I'm very familiar. Sure, they can target me. Microsoft Advertising, hey, I'm familiar with them too, but I already have a computer. I don't need to buy another one. Why should I have Microsoft advertise to me? And then AOL Advertising. Well, I'm familiar with AOL. I used to have their internet service. It never worked very well. Why should I trust them? So you can see that people are making privacy decisions based on information that really has nothing to do with the kinds of use of their data. People were kind of at a loss to figure out how they could use this information about the name of the company to make these sorts of privacy decisions. So then we sent people to use some of these tools. So this is the tool from the Digital Advertising Alliance. It's on their website. And we asked them to use the tool to opt out of tracking. And here people went and they clicked on everything on this page that looked like it was clickable. And nothing worked. And eventually, if they clicked randomly or if they gave up and asked us, they found out you were supposed to click on that checkbox, which doesn't look like a clickable item. And that's how you actually get to the opt-out page. And by the way, this I view as a huge usability problem, was in place for like 6 or 7 years before the DAA finally got around to changing it. If you do click on that checkbox, you get to this page here, and the little wheel spins for a while and says it's checking the trackers on your computer. And then eventually you get this long list of hundreds of different companies you've never heard of, and asks you which ones you want to opt out of. Now, when people tried Ghostery, and this is a version of Ghostery from a long time ago. This is what we tested back in 2011. Ghostery also had that long list of websites you've never heard of, which confused people, as well as a lot of jargon, like web bugs and cookie protection, and people didn't quite know what that was. And then the Internet Explorer interface, if you wanted to actually change those default settings, it had a lot of jargon as well, including third-party cookies and compact privacy policy, or first-party cookies. And on this setting, it says that you can, this adjustment protects you as cookies without your implicit consent. Without my implicit consent, that sounds kind of like a double negative, and I'm not entirely sure what this means. So we found in this study that users really can't use the existing opt-out tools effectively. And we came up with a bunch of recommendations. And thankfully, actually, a lot of the tool providers followed a number of our recommendations. And they did actually improve the tools. So Ghostery is an example of a tool which has improved quite a bit since this paper. So we recommended that they reduce jargon, and they provide feedback to users so they would know what was happening. We also said that you really can't expect users to understand these technologies or distinguish between hundreds of different tracking companies. We also pointed out that cookies were problematic as a means to opt out because people delete them, and that people don't recognize this ad choices icon. So the industry fired back, the ad industry, and they said, oh, what do you mean people don't recognize this ad choices icon? It has revolutionized consumer education. We were a little skeptical, and we said, OK, well, we'll do another study to see if we were right the first time or not. So this time, instead of just 48 participants, we had over 1,500 participants in our study. We did this online with Amazon Mechanical Turk. So we showed people a screenshot of the New York Times website, which had a number of ads with the ad choices icon present. And we asked people first whether they saw anything related to privacy on this page. And the vast majority of people said nope. And then we drew their attention to an ad with an icon and a tagline. And we actually tested both the actual ad choices icon as well as another icon which had been previously considered by the industry. And we tested a bunch of different taglines. So besides ad choices, we tested some other taglines that some websites were using, as well as some taglines that we made up, and the no tagline. So then we asked people some questions, like what would happen if you clicked on the icon? And we gave people a number of choices and asked them which ones they agreed with. And so I'm going to show you some responses. And note, this adds up to more than 100 because some people thought more than one thing would happen. So 56% of people thought more ads will pop up. That's wrong. 45% thought it will take you to a page where you can buy advertisements on websites. This is also wrong. And 27% thought it will take you to a page where you can opt out of tailored ads. Finally, the right answer. But only 27% of people got the right answer. Now, fortunately, we tested other taglines as well. So with the tagline configure ad preferences, people did a lot better. We got up to 50% with the right answer. I mean, that's still a failing grade, but still, it's a lot better. And this suggested to us that if the ad industry actually wanted to communicate better about privacy, they could do some iterative testing and refining of their icon and their taglines, and they could probably improve communication quite a bit. They have chosen not to do that. So there have been some recent changes to the opt-out tools. The industry has spiffed up their website a bit. And now when you go there and try to opt out, you get an experience that looks something like this. And I did this on my computer the other day, and this wheel with the percentage turns very, very, very slowly. But eventually got up to 100%. And then I got this long scrolling list of different websites, different trackers I might want to opt out of, and I clicked the opt out of all button. And then it told me something about, oh, I had third-party cookie blocking on my computer, and this was going to be a problem, but if I pressed the green button, I could begin opt out now. And then I watched the wheel turn again very, very slowly as it was preparing my browser. And then I watched the wheel turn very slowly again. And then I had success, for 10 out of 123 companies. I have no idea what happened to the other 113 companies and why I had no success, but I had no success. And sure enough, when I went back and looked at the list of companies, they all said that the opt-out was temporarily unavailable. And I tried it again later, and they were still temporarily unavailable. Oh, well. So Ghostery, as I mentioned, has actually improved quite a bit. Instead of that long list of websites, now they're put into categories. And you can configure Ghostery with the different categories of trackers and decide for an entire category whether to allow it or not. And then when you visit a web page, you can see how many trackers that you have sorted by category. And then you can drill down and look at the particular trackers in that category if you want to. And then you can also click through and get more information about a particular tracker. And then you can actually get the link to go and read the full privacy policy for that tracker if you like. And now you're back to reading privacy policies again. So my students are currently working on a project where we are reading privacy policies and looking for opt-out information. Because this is what most users do, actually, when they want to read a privacy policy, is because they're trying to figure out how to opt out. So what should you look for? Can you just jump to that part of the policy with the opt-out information? How many clicks does it actually take? So we've done a pilot study with 25 websites, and we plan to do this actually with hundreds of websites. My poor students have to actually read all of these. And so they found there is some good things. There are some websites that have nice, clear headings. How can I manage or delete information about me? And if you go there, it takes you directly to the page where you would opt out. But there are other privacy policies that have headings with words like how, not very clear. And then there's a link somewhere that's, learn more here. And that little here is hyperlinked. And you have to find that here and click on it. And that's how you get to the page that tells you about opting out. So this is not very clear at all. And there's some websites that have a multi-step process for opting out. So here's one where first you have to navigate to the correct page. They have many, many choices. And you have to figure out, well, what do you want to opt out of? And in this case, if I wanted to opt out of, say, email communication, wait, do I opt out of do I go to communication preferences or email? I mean, email seems like a type of communication. And then if I go there, I find out that, there's like 76 different categories of things that I can opt out of. And do I have to check all of those boxes? And then when I do get through checking or not checking, I scroll down to the bottom, and I have to actually tick the box that says do not send send this email. And then I have to remember to click the update button, because if I don't click the update button, then all is for naught, and I will not opt out of anything. And then there are the websites that seem to have just multiple places to opt out of maybe the same thing, maybe different things. So this is Twitter, or this was Twitter, I guess, like until yesterday, when I think they changed their privacy policy again, which a lot of websites are doing right now in preparation for GDPR. So on Twitter, if you want to opt out, you can go to your account settings, and there's a button for opt out implemented by Twitter. Or you can go to Twitter's About Ads page, and there you have 5 links to 5 different opt-outs. Do they opt you out of the same thing or different things? I'm not entirely sure. And then I can go to the privacy policy, where I can find 2 different opt-out links. So it's not entirely clear which one of these I should actually follow, or whether I have to follow all 5 of them. So is this transparency? Is this actually helping people understand and control their data? I'm not so sure. So let's talk about a different issue here, the privacy features in web browsers. So most of the major web browsers have a number of privacy features, including something which is often known as private browsing or incognito. And there was a study that was presented here at this conference yesterday about whether people actually understand what these private browsing modes do. And what they found is that there's a lot of misconceptions. People assume that these private browsing modes are protecting them in ways that they don't actually protect them in. So these private browsing modes don't prevent geolocation, they don't protect you from malware, they don't eliminate advertisements, and they don't actually prevent tracking. Now, the good news was that they tested the information about these private browsing modes from a number of different web browsers, and they did find that actually the Chrome desktop information was pretty good, that it definitely reduced the number of misconceptions that people had. But the information provided by the other web browsers was not so good. Now, my students have also been looking at this, and we've been using a tool that we have at Carnegie Mellon called the Security Behavior Observatory. So we have recruited participants for our study who are home Windows computer users. And we pay them to allow us to install software on their computer that sends us information about their security and privacy behaviors. At any given time, we usually have about 200 active participants who are sending us data. Now, in this study, this allows us to do a natural observation of what people are just doing on their computer, but we can also send them follow-up surveys or do interviews with them, and we pay them extra for that. So we've been looking at what these people do in private browsing mode. We collected all of the URLs that people visit in private browsing mode, and we analyzed them to see what are they doing. So the most common thing that we see people are doing is using private browsing mode to log into services. We expect this is services where people have multiple accounts, and so they use private browsing mode to try to separate what's going on in their different accounts. There's lots of just general browsing, no apparent reason, anything specific to trigger private browsing mode. General searches. A lot of people use private browsing mode for streaming audio or video. Some use it to access adult content, to visit social media sites, for shopping. There's a lot more adult content searches in private browsing mode than not in private browsing mode, as well as sensitive browsing and sensitive searches, which are mostly healthcare-related browsing and searches. So what we see is that people are actually using private browsing mode for a number of things which are sensitive, and their misconceptions about it could actually put them at risk. Okay, so let's talk about the security side of things. Passwords. People have lots and lots of passwords. How do they manage all of them? Well, we use data from the Security Behavior Observatory to try to get some insights into that. So another thing that we collect is hashes of the passwords that people enter into their web browser. And we also collect information about how long their passwords are, the strength, the number of character classes, and other things like that. So we analyzed data from 154 participants about their passwords. We found that on average, our participants had 26 different accounts that they accessed via their web browsers, but they had only 10 distinct passwords for those 26 accounts. And we looked carefully at their passwords, and we divided them into 4 groups. So we had the non-reused passwords, the password that a person used only once. That happened 21% of the time, not very much. Then we had the people who exactly reused their password on multiple accounts. And that also didn't happen that much, only 16% of the time. And then there were the partially reused passwords. So first I create a password monkey1, then I create monkey2, monkey3, monkey4. Right? That's a partial reuse. But then we got to what we call exact and partial reuse. And these are people who create monkey1, monkey2, monkey3, and then they do it again. And they use monkey1 on 5 accounts and monkey2 on 10 accounts. That's actually half the passwords are being used in that particular way. So here it is graphically. Each of these bars represents one user in our study, and the colors represent the percentage of their passwords that are reused or not. So we had a small group of users who didn't reuse very many passwords. But as you can see, they also don't have very many passwords. And then there was a small group of users who also don't have very many passwords, but they tend to partially reuse all the passwords they have. And then there was a bigger group that exactly reuses most of their passwords. And an even bigger group that's all over the place. Some passwords they reuse and some they don't. But there's one more group. These are the exact and partial reusers. And so you can see the green here are the passwords that they don't reuse. There's very few passwords that they're not reusing. Most of their passwords, they're both exactly and partially reusing. So reuse is completely rampant. And then we said, well, maybe they're just reusing passwords across certain categories. Surely they're financial passwords they're not reusing. Wrong. We found that almost every category of website, people are reusing their passwords a lot. Then we did a study in our lab where we invited people in and talked to them about passwords, and we found a lot of misconceptions. I'm just going to highlight a couple. A lot of people told us that a really good way to create a password is with a keyboard pattern, because it looks like really random-like, and yet you can remember it because you just go up and down your keyboard. But the thing is, a lot of people do this. Like multiple people in our study did this. And if you look at all of the lists of hacker dictionaries, the list of passwords that attackers are going to use, keyboard patterns are very high up there on the list. So don't do that. Another misconception, so people told us that they knew that adding a symbol to the end of your password made it more secure. So they seem to think you could take any old bad password and add an exclamation point on the end, which is the most common symbol in a password. And suddenly, magically, your password would be secure. This is, of course, also completely wrong. And it's not too surprising that people have misconceptions, because this is the kind of feedback they get. Your password is weak. Create a stronger password. Right? That teaches you nothing. So my students have developed a new password meter, and this is on our website. We distribute this as an open source project. And we have both better strength estimates for passwords than most of the password meters that are out there on the internet today. And we have actionable feedback that gives people specific suggestions, such as consider inserting digits into the middle, not just at the end. This is some actionable feedback about how to improve your password. And of course, you can also use a password manager, and this is really what I recommend that people do. Increasingly, we're seeing this recommendation, but most people still don't use password managers. And we've also seen that even when people use them, they don't necessarily use them correctly. So here's a list of passwords in somebody's password manager, and you can see here that, that this person has a super safe password, but they're using it in 5 different accounts. And then here they have a whole bunch of not so safe passwords, and they're also reusing those too. And this is pretty typical. And the reason it's typical is because you can also see they have over 200 passwords. And it turns out that if you want to go and visit 200 websites and change all of those bad passwords into good ones when you use a password manager, it takes a really long time. I know I personally have been struggling to convert over with all of my bad passwords into good ones and having my password manager create good ones for me. Now, there are some promising new technologies and some hope that someday maybe we can get out of this whole password race. So W3C is working on some things, and hopefully something pans out well. But in the meantime, we really need to figure out how to use our passwords better and to use password managers to actually help us. OK, the last thing I want to talk about is security warnings. So you've seen these things. They pop up, and you all know what they say. They all say that, right? And so people swat them away. This is actually one area, though, where I think we've had some improvement. So I started doing research on security warnings about 10 years ago, and they were all truly terrible. We came up with some proposals for how to improve them, and we've actually seen the browser vendors have improved them. Here's an example of a connection not private warning, and you can see it's like in plain English. And here's a phishing warning, and it's also pretty clear. They do things like now actually the big button to press is the one for the safe thing. So yes, there's still some room for improvement, but this is an area where over the past 10 years, we've seen some real progress in improving the user experience for security. OK, so where do we stand? What do we still need to do to improve the privacy and security user experience? Well, first of all, I would like to see standardized privacy notices. I think especially as we're pushing for more and more privacy notices, we are having regulations which are requiring more privacy notices. We still don't want people to have to read all of these long privacy notices and sort out all the differences between them. A standardized notice is going to be much, much easier for users. Even better, I still think we need machine-readable privacy notices and automated choice tools so that you don't actually have to read all of those notices, that you can have automated tools that can process these privacy policies for you, whether they're from websites or your smart light bulbs or whatever else in your environment. And I think P3P is probably not the answer at the moment, but we need to find some way forward that will allow us to have computer-readable privacy notices. We also need to make sure that people understand how to use our privacy features. And that requires testing them with real people to find out what people actually understand and whether they know how to make the privacy feature do what they think it is supposed to actually do. And finally, we need convenient and secure ways to authenticate so that we don't all have over 200 different, oh wait, actually they're all the same passwords. So I will end with a photo of the students and staff in my lab at Carnegie Mellon. These are the people who make the magic happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorrie, for this very interesting keynote. We welcome Eric Leandri, who is the CEO of Qwant, and Marie-Hélène Zurko from MIT, who will chair this panel. Yeah.
Merci. Am I on? Great. Good morning. Eric will first give a brief introduction and a little bit on his stance on privacy and security. And then we will start taking questions from the audience and from Twitter on the topic.
So thank you very much for that brief introduction, who is more than complete. And hello, everybody. My name is Eric Leandri. I'm chairman and co-founder of Qwant. And Qwant is a search engine As you know, certainly my main competitor very well. Yes, we are a B2C search engine, so we just give you an answer from the web. The most important difference is that we are a privacy-based search engine. So we have created Qwant with one idea in mind, the Article 12 of the human rights at the United Nations. And the Article 12, for the people who don't know what it is about, it's a right for privacy. So the whole idea of Qwant is to give a search engine, a real search engine, an European-based search engine, who gives you access to the whole web without tracking you at all. So that means that the difference with some of the, let's say, meta search engine that you know who take care of your privacy is that you don't need to read a third-party privacy policy on Qwant because we have our own infrastructure, we own all our servers and even our firewall. So when you arrive on Qwant, even myself have no clues who you are, and nobody, including Amazon or other big cloud services, will have no clue of who you are. So the whole idea is just to bring to the public a European search engine, and a European search engine who works in the US too, in India, or even China, because I don't take the data of French, European, Americans, or Chinese people. And the whole idea here is just to give you access to the web, an ethical web, and a web who is for you, not using you for I don't know what.
Thank you. So if we could get the lights. Yes. Excellent.
Thank you.
If we could get the lights so we know if folks are, so where the microphones are. I know there's one there, one there, one there. And if you don't want your photo, there's one way up there, right? Where is it? Right, right. All right, I will actually begin by asking the first questioner to introduce herself.
Oh, who am I this morning? I'll be Wendy, okay? So I have, I want to say thank you to Lorrie for the wonderful keynote and the wonderful dress. Thank you for the panel. So this is all the panel, but it was sparked by Lorrie's keynote. You have a team of students, wonderful work, fabulous, and fabulous diverse team you have there. But you have a team of students reading all these policies. Immediately says to me, right, how can we best use artificial intelligence in this, right? Issues of natural language processing. I've long thought about there must be a way in which we can do this, but there are dangers as well as advantages. Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we actually, yeah, I have a mic. We actually have a project at Carnegie Mellon called the Usable Privacy Policy Project, where we have been, for several years now, trying to use natural language processing to parse and understand privacy policies. We actually found it's really difficult because privacy policies are so difficult for even humans to understand that, that machines have no chance. We also have tried to use crowdsourcing, and we found that difficult as well. But we are making progress. And what we have been able to do is to use combinations of crowdsourcing and natural language processing to identify the different components of privacy policies. And we have a list of some of the things that people are most interested in knowing from privacy policies, and we can then try to find those facts in a privacy policy. So we do have a website where we show our labeled privacy policies, and we have a data set that we actually invite other researchers to use as well. But it's a work in progress. We're not quite there where we can just have that completely automated at the moment.
Yeah, well, we have a H2020 project to try to do this through AI, so trying to understand what the website you will visit wants from you. So we are working a lot on it, and we are doing AI on this, and we are a search engine, so we do natural language processing every day, and we have a very powerful AI capabilities and GPU capabilities, and we are working with INRIA and others on that field. So I hope we end up somewhere, but I will be very, very happy to add you and others in that kind of study, because it's complicated. And it's complicated in purpose, because if it was not done that way, it was a very simple thing to go through. For example, my privacy policy page, it's one page, the letters are very big, and it's very simple. So if everything was like that, it was a 5 minutes study.
Great. Gentleman in green at the middle.
Hi, my name is Ted Drake, and I'm from Intuit. I've got a question about IE, because you mentioned that Internet Explorer used P3P from 6 to 10. What's going on after that? In that battle in 2012, was that sort of, did they cede to Google saying basically P3P is dead, or what's going on?
Yeah, so my understanding is that at Edge, which I guess has replaced IE, does not have P3P in it. Yeah, that's all I know.
Okay.
I would just add something. Every time that the W3C does something great in that field, or every time that we do something to block or stop ads who bothers you, everything has been forgotten in purpose in each new browser for, your good. For years it was for your good, and 2 days or 3 days ago, Google CEO says that GDPR is not a problem anymore, because to make some ads inside of a search engine, you don't need to know anything about you. But that was 2 days ago. For the last 7 years, it was for your goods that they track you. So P3P has been forgotten because it's better for the usage of your browser. Okay, that was what they say in 2012, because you need new browsers, you need better browsers. Okay? This is bullshit.
Gentleman who does not want to be photographed at the mic in the middle there.
I think I'm the, I was just trying this out. I hadn't noticed anybody else using this, so I'm trying out. I'm not crazy about not being photographed, but I want to test the system. So I'm testing both the orange mic and the orange lanyard. We'll see how they work. How they work for next time. So Lorrie, the P3P story is really interesting. It's fascinating in that so much energy goes into trying to get everything right, and a lot of it works. And for the first time, we have machine-readable sort of legal stuff being actually working in the browser and so on. And I don't think anybody expected Microsoft to turn it on by default. I think a lot of people, the implicit assumption was the browsers will leave it off by default, and the servers will, the companies will implement it, but it will be left for the crazy users to turn it on. Maybe I'm misremembering that assumption people had, but then Microsoft turned it on by default, and it became very, very real. And then where the place that it ended up, as you describe, is that you can put something in your web page that says, "Here is my privacy policy," and then the privacy policy is garbage. It doesn't parse. If you had a pointer to a human-readable one, you said, "Here's my privacy policy," and it was complete gobbledygook, then I can imagine there would be legal ramifications. So I think there's been a lot of breakage in the world because people have put things, spammers have found that if they put completely fictitious email addresses in from fields of email addresses, there's no repercussions. Whereas if they sent paper mail with completely fictitious from fields, then that would be fraudulent. So is there a mismatch? Are there lots of cases of this where people are saying things in bits which have a meaning, they're actually being fraudulent, and do we need to have somehow, for the legal and regulatory world, to be much quicker to read the standards and to say, yeah, and say you are saying something just as though you had said it, and is there a gap which we could close, which would help all kinds of these technologies to become and help the police crack down on all kinds of stuff, which is in fact fraud, which at the moment they just wave their hands over because it's bits. What do you think?
Yeah. So that's an excellent question. When we were developing P3P, we were actually afraid of exactly this. And people said to us, well, is a P3P policy enforceable? Like, are you going to enforce it? And we said, well, we're the W3C. We are not a regulatory body. We can't enforce it. So we called in regulators. And I remember we called in regulators from the United States and from Canada and Germany and France and many other jurisdictions. And we said, what would you do if somebody lied in a P3P policy? And they all said, we would do exactly what our authority allows us to do when someone lies in a human-readable privacy policy. And we said, great, that's perfect. That's what we want you to do. And so then when this happened, I sat there waiting for those regulators to step up and do what they promised they would do. And none of them did it. The best we got in the United States, there was a class action lawsuit against one of these big companies. And it got thrown out of the courts for some technicalities, and so it never proceeded. But the regulators didn't do anything. And I have asked them, I haven't gotten a good answer. So I think this is a problem, and I think this is going to be a problem for future technologies if we don't figure out a solution to it.
I think in Europe it will be a little bit different, and I don't know if you know, Europe are not so good for technology. I'm joking. But not so good for B2C big giant. But we are #1 in regulation in the world. So that's true, you will see. And in Europe, some of this kind of giant has been condemned by the regulator several times at 150,000 euros. It's not a lot, sure. Now it's 4% of the total turnover. So it will be different. And if somebody is catched with 4 billion or 10 billion fine, then
yeah, if the European regulators will step in for a computer-readable policy. I mean, I think we actually had in writing from the German regulator that they would enforce P3P policies, and then they didn't do it. And so I don't know why.
All right, gentleman in black over here.
Yeah, so I'm Paul Groth, Elsevier Labs. I was really compelled by the Security Behavior Observatory as a method, and I was wondering how you recruit members and what you compensate them for, and how do you guarantee the privacy of what you observe? Thank you.
Yeah, so we recruit people through a number of different sources. There are a number of mailing lists and forums for people who like to do studies, and so we advertise there. We have had companies that will call people and ask them to participate in studies, recruit for us. We compensate people, I think it's about $10 a month for participation, and anytime they have to fill out a survey or like the initial enrollment, they get paid more because there are more things that they need to do. When people enroll, they have extensive consent agreement, and we ask that if there are multiple users of their computer, that everybody who uses the computer has to read the consent. And we actually have one of our research assistants has a phone call with them to make sure they understand what they're getting themselves into. So we're not trying to hide what we're doing. And then as far as actually protecting their data, we're of course very concerned about that. So we have set up an infrastructure where, first of all the data that we collect is encrypted both while it's on their computer, while it's in transit, and while it's on our servers. And we have a server infrastructure where once things are delivered to our server via the internet, they are immediately moved to a more secure server, which is very restricted access. And then our research assistants who analyze the data can only access that data while they're on campus and we have multi-factor authentication to access the data. So we've put in a number of provisions in place because some of this is sensitive data. We also don't put the name of the person with their data, things like that. But even things like we have these hashes of passwords. So it's hashed, it's great, but we have enough information that a determined attacker could actually reconstruct some password information. So we want to make sure that they won't have access to that data.
Gentleman over here.
Thank you. My name is Andrew Pavid from Aalto University in Finland. My question is about the economics of privacy. Do we have any good data on how much users are willing to pay for privacy, either in terms of money or time spent reading privacy policies, or perhaps accepting an alternative service? And I ask this because is there a way we can make an economic argument to these companies to say, here's something users are willing to pay for, you should really make sure you are protecting their privacy, or do we need regulation to step in and say users are not willing to invest enough, we need to regulate?
Well, from our research, we found that people are willing to pay, but not very much. And so, there is a cost in terms of figuring out how to get better privacy, and often that cost is too high. In our Privacy Finder study, we had people purchasing basically $10 items, and they would pay about 60 cents more. But I can't extrapolate from that. I can't tell you that if it was a $100 item, they would pay $6 more. My guess is no. But we only tried the $10 price point, and that was one point in time 10 years ago when we did it.
Oh, and, yeah, I'm running a business based on privacy. So, first of all, there are several things in your question, because I perfectly understand that answer. But the truth is, today, there's a lot of people who are ready to pay if it's a privacy-based cloud, for example. You don't want your data to be collected and distributed without knowing. Some of us does. They don't care, We have seen Facebook recently with good ideas of how making cash with you. But the whole idea behind that is the fact that if you start running a cloud privacy-based service and really a securized service, then people will pay for that already, every day. Then if we talk about search and if we talk about privacy, the fact that you can start trusting your search online without being the subject of the search, give to that search engine sometimes very good users who are there, even if we are not perfect in some countries, they come for that. So we make cash out of it, right? And so it's not always to pay for privacy. It's what is the difference between treating and your customers well, ethically, or using them to make the maximum of cash. So you can make an economic out of privacy today. The problem is, what is real privacy? What is fantastic with that kind of introduction and the keynote was privacy, like the privacy mode in your browser. Everybody thinks that's great. I mean, the privacy mode, fantastic. Wow. So it's a lot of things that you need to know, and it's complicated. And it's why I think that there is a lot of space for services who make it simple. Ghostery, it's a proof of trying to simplify trackers and what they do, what they know about you and what they do for you. Why there is so many users of Ghostery? Search engine, since Facebook, we get a traction of 20% growth by day for 15 days. Why there is so many people who try to go on a privacy-based search engine? And then for the cloud, let's come back to big giants, Microsoft. Microsoft 365, the one where your Word, Excel, and everything is online. Okay, before they start to apply very strict rules, it was complicated for Europeans to think that they will be in the cloud of Microsoft. Today, it seems that a lot of companies start to go to that cloud too, because it seems that it's perfectly a follow obligation of European clouds. I don't know if it's totally perfect. I haven't gone in that field deeper enough. But what I see is every time a company does that kind of things, the result is very different. And look at Brave and the idea of using crypto to give you rewards of using a browser who take care of your privacy. Or look at Tor. No? I think that there is a fantastic economy behind that, a fantastic one, and it will be very soon everywhere, not only here, everywhere.
Is there someone up at the no photo?
Yes.
Yes.
So first of all, thanks for your keynote and the panel. The first thing I would like to mention is that I found it really awkward and disrespectful how Tim was testing this privacy microphone, and I saw several professional cameras photographing him, taking pictures. I hope it was just a discussion that was agreed upon previously. And then I would like to thank this conference and Mozilla for giving the orange badges and this privacy microphone as well. And I would like to also say in Firefox, they have backported from the Tor project third-party cookie isolation. It's in some secret preference, you can try it out. And also container isolation and, for example, Facebook isolation. There are add-ons for that you can separate your sessions more easily. So it's some alternative also to private browsing mode. You should check that out if you're interested. And for email privacy, for example, mailbox.org, they charge €1 per month and you get your email privately. There are also some other email companies to provide that. So I think we already have a lot of choice. Thank you.
Fabian, I think, wants to say something.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My apologies. The photograph here just made a joke. He perfectly understood and didn't take any picture. It was just to make the joke. Maybe it was inappropriate. My apologies.
Merci. And we'll stay at the mic here.
So hi, I'm Natalia Belova from INRIA. So in the web privacy research, there are different research doing different things. Like Lorrie explained that she's doing really great research on usable privacy and privacy policies. There are other people working on web tracking technologies and try to understand exactly how people are tracked on the web. And then we have regulators, like in Europe we have GDPR and e-privacy regulations that are coming up. So it looks like there are these three actors, like the trackers, the users, and the regulators. So as a web privacy research, that's the question for Lorrie, like where do you think we should go? Should we like unite all the efforts, or what are the next challenges that we need to solve there?
Yeah, so I think privacy is a very kind of interdisciplinary area. So, you know, I've been focusing on the user side, but it's also important to look at the back end and what's going on with the tracking, as well as to look at privacy-enhancing technologies, which may use new cryptographic techniques and different sort of mathematical functions to actually provide some types of privacy guarantees. So I think we need to do all of these things, and increasingly we have privacy conferences where it brings people from these different domains together to try to work together to address some of these problems.
Thank you.
So we have time for two more, so we'll take the gentleman who's been waiting here and then the one who just stepped up.
Thank you for the talk, Martin Resch from Rakuten. I was wondering if we now start charging for the services, wouldn't it mean that some people, if they have money, they have a right to privacy, and if they don't, either don't have right to privacy or they cannot access the services?
I can, yeah. Sorry, but I think it's not true. I really think it's not true, because you're right. If you have some money, you can try to get access to privacy, but let's talk about stars. If you are Orlando Bloom or Leonardo DiCaprio, today try to get privacy offline and try to get privacy online. It's complicated, very complicated. So you're right. We should not be, and you're totally right on one thing. Even if you are poor, you should have the right for privacy. This is human rights. It's not a game. It's human rights. And so human rights means we need to have services who take care of your privacy without knowing you. You can be rich, you can be poor, you can be in the middle, you can be anything. You should have the right for privacy because it's a human right. Okay, so that means that don't think that rich are totally easily capable of privacy now, today, online, because we have a session explaining how to get 15 minutes of privacy online. 15 minutes, not 365 days a year, not every time, not just 15 minutes. Try 15 minutes of privacy online. You will see it's very complicated. You can be rich, you can be poor, you can be everything you want. You still need to be very, very skilled in privacy and start to forget a lot of services. Because, for example, when the services, even if you are rich or poor, end up with the new policy for GDPR, and the new policy is, okay, you have now make a photo of your face. It will be better for recognizing you in over photography and take care of your private life. And at the end, it's end up like the best choice. Okay, you don't want to accept this new policy. You have other choices. Click here. You click here, and then it ends up with a fantastic pop-up saying, okay, get out or confirm. This is a choice? This isn't a choice. This is not GDPR. GDPR is right to have the choice. Okay, so you can't be a search engine and pay 8 billion to be in the launcher by default and oblige everybody to say yes to the search engine just to access a phone call. That's not a choice. And that is for everybody, just because they put check on the table. That's not possible. This is not choice. This is not the capability for you to choose if you want or not to be tracked. That's not GDPR at all. I hope this year we will prove that you can have the right for privacy, even if you are rich, even if you are poor, in Europe. For the rest of the world, I have understood that they don't want to apply normal human rights to all of you. So for the rest of the world, try a VPN in Europe, and so you will have maybe some protection.
And we have time for one more question. So this, I'm sorry, will be the last question.
Okay. Jean-François Bramatic. Just a disclaimer, I was W3C chairman when P3P was launched. So, and my question is about lessons learned, right? So there's been 20 years. So Lorrie, in her keynote, presented a lot of the facts that came along since this was launched. And the last comment from Lorrie was, she talked, or the team or whoever talked with the regulators, and they commit to enforce, and they didn't. And so my question is about lesson learned. Why do you think they didn't do it? Is it because they lied? Personally, I don't believe it. Is it because they didn't know how to do it? And I think this is closer to the answer, but I'd like to hear yours.
So we'll all take this one, and I'll go first, because I think I have the least interesting thing to say, but there is something I want to say. And by the way, I also participated in the P3P effort back in the day, chairing one of the subgroups.
Thanks, Marie-Hélène.
Merci, Jeff. At the time that P3P and compact policies rolled out, I was security architect of one of IBM's initial SaaS offerings, Lotus Live as a cloud. And as chief security architect of an early cloud, I had the authority and responsibility of reviewing anything that happened, content or computer code for security and privacy issues. And I distinctly remember the day when, only as an aside, I discovered that one of my web developers had been having problems with IE and had twiddled some HTTP headers he did not understand, and got IE to work for the next version we were rolling out of our cloud service. I was the only person in the place who understood that he had just made legal obligations on the part of our professional service, and so was able to stop it and say, no, you can't do that. You need to go look at what our privacy policy actually is. So I have some sympathy for the fact that at least then there was a large divide between the part of the organizations that wrote the human language privacy policies and the part that wrote the computer interpreted ones. It was, at least back then, a difficult thing to keep in line. All right, who wants to go second to last?
Well, so I think that the regulators, I don't think, lied. I don't think they purposely said one thing and did something else. I think it was very difficult for them. I think most of the regulators, their privacy staffs they're understaffed. Having spent a year working for the U.S. privacy regulator, the Federal Trade Commission, there are many more cases that are brought to their attention than they have time to go after. And they viewed this as kind of a little obscure technical thing that wasn't where they decided to prioritize and put their efforts. I think generally, though, this whole notion of using P3P as a self-regulatory model where there wasn't actually regulatory teeth behind it was problematic. And I think we did not have the incentives in place for companies to want to participate. They were very excited at the beginning because there had been a focus on privacy from certain regulators. And by the time we finished the standard, the regulators were looking at something else. And so the companies said, why should we do this? And the regulators were busy enforcing something else and weren't spending their time on that. And so I think fundamentally having these self-regulatory privacy standards, we've been trying to do this for over 20 years now. And sadly, I have to conclude that they get us a little bit. They move the needle slightly, but they don't really get us there.
Eric, would you finish this?
I will love to live in that world, a world of just lawyers and technical people. But there is a world in between, the world of the people who are there to do lobby. And if you look at the time, it was 2012. 2012 was the start, 2010, 2011, 2012 was the start of pre-targeting, retargeting, and all these things. So it was the worst time ever to try to add policies in ads. We started Qwant in 2011, so at that time, in 2013, when we relaunched the first version, everybody was explaining to me that if I don't retarget, resell your data, resell your information, keep it, try to retarget you and add and pre-target you, I will make zero cash, zero, ever. And if I have a privacy policy which doesn't help us to get a lot of data, I will not be able to do AI, I will not be able to give you answers, I will not be able to make cash at all. That's bullshit. We do cash, we do AI, we do privacy, just because we don't want to do more than enough to deliver a service. And so don't forget that the people who does the lobby are very, very active, very active. And the people you are fighting against are the people who are making the maximum of cash on that planet. So it's not only you and the technical thing, it's you, the technical thing, and the lobby that they are ready to do to stop some regulators to act, because they will explain to them that will stop technology, that will stop capabilities for tomorrow, that will stop a lot of other things. And now, it seems that they can even do cash, even if the GDPR is in force, and it seems that you can have some privacy and still make cash. But for years, it was not the case. It's complicated because they play a bad game to try to stop that kind of normal regulation because they want more cash. That's it.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Lorrie and Eric, for an excellent privacy discussion.
We have also a question on Twitter that will be the last question.
Oh, no.
Yeah. On password managers in the cloud, a too risky single point of failure.
Yes. So, yeah, a lot of people have concerns about password managers as a single point of failure, and especially in the cloud. I think it's security is a question of managing risks. So most people who don't use a password manager have a small number of passwords that they use over and over again. And we know that that is very, very risky because once attackers get one password, they'll then try that password for your other accounts. And chances are you might not even know that one of your accounts was breached, and therefore your other accounts are at risk. With a password manager, if you use one of the well-known password managers, if that does get breached, you're going to know about it. And so I think it's a much more manageable and controllable risk. So my risk balance says that's a safer thing to do than to reuse your passwords everywhere. Now, on the other hand, if you can keep your password manager not in the cloud, or you can keep your password manager actually on a piece of paper locked away behind a key that only you have, yeah, sure, that's even less risk.
And we will release a piece of software called Mask, M-A-S-Q, like Qwant. The idea is to stop that idea of adding a login and password and start using it on your mobile with encryption and a lot of things, and use peer-to-peer instead of cloud to give the data between all your devices. Why not coming back to peer-to-peer, forgetting the cloud? We have 256 giga on quite all our cell phone today. Tons of things can be saved directly in your pocket, but if they take your cell phone and you give your PIN number, then it will be more complicated to protect you. But I think it's more private than the cloud.
Great. Merci. All right. Are we done? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for this very interesting panel. Now, as you know, this 2018 edition of the Web Conference, the first of this new name, is almost over, and we will give, yeah, Fabien is trying to say something. We will, excuse me. So now the 2019 edition is already on its trails, and you have maybe discovered them at their booths on the exhibition and living area. Now you will be able to see them on stage after this video presentation of the Web Conference 2019 in San Francisco.
So the web, there was this kind of pent-up demand. People didn't necessarily realize it, but there was this demand. And as soon as there was a single system that got, wide acceptance, it's like you have 20, 30, 40 years of ideas and ambitions for what you could do with online commerce and connecting people and wikis and online collaboration, etc., suddenly found this expression. So I think a lot of the reason the web exploded is that it kind of allowed and enabled all of these things that were in the works to suddenly try to find expression, kind of a dam bursting.
CERN does physics, not computing. The dam bursting analogy is not entirely wrong. Although there was a lot of work being done out there at large, and certainly inside a physics laboratory, there was no way that we were going to get full-scale resource support for something that was totally accessory to the mainstream of what we were doing at CERN. So it had to get out with a project like the web, where nobody understands you, because the only way to make people understand what it is about is to show it to them, to make them experience it. And I said, look, this, as I click here, when I let go of the mouse button, that page is coming from Hawaii. And so he looked at this, and I saw his eyes widen. And I clicked another one, and another page came up with another bunch of dinosaurs. And then he pushed me aside and grabbed the mouse and began clicking himself.
When the web came out, and you could just very easily, with some very simple handwritten in the early days, markup language, HTML, you could make a page, and you could put a picture on the page and make links to other pages. And it was immediately a kind of a revelation. If you wrote a web page and it adhered to the HTML standard, it could be read by anyone who had a browser that could read the HTML standard. And that meant that very quickly we had competing browsers, we had competing websites, we had an open ecosystem that anyone could join.
The core question is, what is the value that defines the web? And my belief is that the value is neutrality. And I think the future of the web as this neutral platform will depend on the extent to which policymakers remain committed to that neutrality by resisting the dominance of market players who would compromise that. We need to repair or complement or supplement the infrastructure so as to preserve the basic experience by content providers and users and application providers of this as a neutral platform that encourages innovation and creativity open to all.
In the 90s, when everyone was looking for ways of sharing information, the idea was it was all meant to be for the good. It was to open up knowledge. It was to enable communication between people across the world. Everything was all about what we could do for the good. And that feels now as if it's turned on us. The big question is, how do we protect ourselves from the bad things without losing all the good things? And this, to me, is why the web conference is so important. You have to look at it from many different angles, the economics and regulatory systems, the law, philosophy, politics. We need to be discussing how we take the web forward in such a way that it's good for humanity.
It is working. I'm waiting for Ricardo to join us. And he's showing that I should continue, so I'll do it. Welcome to the Web Conference 2019. My name is Leila Zia, and along with Ricardo Baeza-Yates, we are the general co-chairs for the 2019 edition of the conference. And of course, we have been working with an amazing team of people for the past 2.5 years to bring this conference for you in 2019 in San Francisco. So the date for the conference is May 13 to 17, 2019. The conference location is San Francisco. For those of you who know the city, is going to be in Hyatt at Embarcadero, close to the water. And we will come to the 2019 edition at a moment that we will be celebrating the 30th anniversary of the web. We also, when we get together next time, we will be celebrating the moment where more than 50% of the world's population has got access to internet, and they have connected to the rest of the world. This is a milestone that will be reached by the end of 2018, November 2018 to be more specific. So as we pass these two milestones, basically the 30th anniversary of the web and a world in which more than 50% of the people will have the opportunity to be connected, we want to use the opportunity for 2019 to step back as a community and think about where we want to take our world. The road that we have come so far and the place that we want to create for ourselves, but also for the future generations. And we have tried to take this message and reflect it for everything that we do for 2019 as much as possible. I'm not going to go through the details, but we're mainly going to focus on how to build a more inclusive and open web, a web for good. And this is reflected in the keynotes that we will bring for you to the program, but also in pretty much every aspect of the program, including the call for paper, which is, by the way, up on our website, where you see the link to it at the end of this talk. And now I'm going to pass it to Ricardo to talk about the fun stuff.
So thank you, Leila. And if the technical part is not enough, if you haven't been in San Francisco, it's a wonderful city. It can be chilly, but you have to be prepared. It's a nice view. At night, one of the landmarks of the city, the Golden Gate, most people have seen it, and it's in our logo. Culture, for example, Chinatown. You can walk there from the conference location. Just by coincidence, after the conference in the weekend, Sunday, there is the Bay to Breakers run, if you like to run, and it's a fun run because you can run with a costume. If you want to do something else, that day you can go and do some trekking in the Muir Woods. And if you don't see the relation, this very important relation here, because in that woods were filmed the last series of the Planet of the Apes, but not with the Y in the left. Then a World Heritage Site, Yosemite National Park. If you haven't been there, it's amazing. And if you like wine like me, Napa and Sonoma are close. And I will not argue which one is better because I have my own opinions. So if you want to go a bit further, you can go to the Monterey Aquarium. This is one of the most amazing sites there, a lot of jellyfish. So please come next year, and we're waiting for you.
Thank you, and now it is break time. Please don't forget to vote for posters and demos.